The deadline for us is going to be October of 25, and we are getting ready for that deadline.
And the title of this session, are we ready for a new world order?
Oh, we see the gleams of the golden morning, piercing through this night of gloom. Oh, we see the gleams of the golden morning that will burst the tomb. Greetings, salutations. Welcome to this midday power surge, your spiritual oasis on this pilgrim journey. I'm your host, Andrew Henriquez. And today I have a special guest, Marie Diaz from Eyes on the Times. And we'll be discussing this warning signal, this current event, as it is fulfilling end-time prophecies. Everything changes in the next 18 to 48 months. The money of the beast system is about to be launched just in time for the mark of the beast crisis. Yet the majority of the people in the world are ignorant, and God's professed people are fast asleep. It's time for us to implement the 5 keys of survival. It's time for us to awaken those in the world and in the church. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you so much for having me, Pastor. It's great to be back.
So in the beginning, I wrote 2 clips, and I'm going to play the first once more, and then you could take it from there. Here it is.
The deadline for us is going to be October of 25, and we are getting ready for that deadline.
This deadline, October 2025. Marie, what are your eyes focused on as it relates to current events fulfilling end-time prophecies?
Well, as you stated, Pastor, it's time for us to implement those 5 keys of survival, because we're seeing that the movement is on foot, and the system that we have been discussing for the last several months is now here. And the question is, are we ready for it? And so we're going to take a deep dive this morning, and I hope that your audience is ready, because I believe that this presentation is going to be a nail in a sure place.
Let's get into it.
So we're going to begin this presentation by taking a look at another clip here. And in this video, the commentator is going to ask some very poignant questions. And I want your audience to pay particular attention to what he's saying that lawmakers are currently working on and how this is going to affect each and every one of us. So let's take a listen to that first clip here.
Here it is.
Imagine using an EU-wide app to pay your bills, check in at an airport, rent a car, or upload a medical file. You log in with a unique lifelong ID number. To some, this probably sounds very convenient, much like traveling easily across borders with a digital COVID certificate that's recognized everywhere. To others, it's the stuff of nightmares, a digital prison of permanent surveillance and control. Either way, plans for an EU digital identity are coalescing, with a common toolbox expected to be unveiled this September. To debate this
I mean, that's clear what he said.
Exactly. Some serious questions that he asked there. And, this is something that many of us may think is well into the future. But I also want to reiterate some of the questions that he asked. He talked about the fact that this EU-wide app that they're discussing will help you to pay your bills, to check in at the airport, to rent a vehicle, all of these things, upload a file, your medical files. But not just that, I want your audience to remember that this is something that is already currently taking place, not just in places like China, but as was mentioned in the EU, that clip we just played is actually an older clip. And so now that doesn't mean that everyone is necessarily using the platform, but I just want to distinguish the fact that the platform has already been established. So we're going to take a look at this next headline here, which kind of discusses this a little bit more. The headline says, Great Reset Watch, EU Parliament approves digital identity wallet. The EU Parliament has approved the creation of a digital wallet system, raising concerns over increasing state control of people's lives. It goes on to say, digital identity has evolved from being a mere convenience to becoming a catalyst for civic involvement, social empowerment, and a means to foster inclusivity in a digital age. So, Pastor, in other words, what they're essentially saying is that they're creating this system in which you will not be able to participate in society, be able to buy and sell, like I said, play an active role in society unless you transition into this digital system.
Now, if you notice that clip, he stated, for some, what is being launched is a digital prison. Now, focus on that term prison, because we need, and just as we do, we have a biblical perspective on current events. And the great controversy between Christ and Satan, it has always been Satan's objective to imprison mankind. That's clearly stated in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12 through verse 19, to keep the people in captivity, in bondage, in prison. It actually says imprisonment. And now we're seeing a system being rolled out. It's already here. And now we're hearing from Christine Lagarde by October 2025. That date is our deadline.
Mercy. So we're going to continue looking at the article because there's some other points that we want to draw from it here. It says, according to a press release from the Parliament, the wallet will be adopted on a voluntary basis. Of course, they always tell us that it's voluntary, but it goes on to say, however, others have warned of the possibility of digital wallets being used for authoritarian purposes. And of course, there's, people who are standing and opposing this system. This MEP, Christian here, said, the cross-border digital identity are a part of the Chinification of Europe, creating a CCP-style social credit score through the back door. Although they say it'll be voluntary, just like they said the digital inoculation passports would be voluntary, this system is the foundation of a Chinese social credit style digital surveillance system. So, we've been told, through multiple sources that China is the model. The beast, the Vatican has talked about how China is the model. Not just that, the World Economic Forum has also established that China is the model. And so if you want to see where all these things are tending, that's exactly where we're going. And it's been reiterated in this article here. And of course, the way for them to implement the system, they can't just write out, go against our human rights laws, right? And so they have to use some sort of back door to start introducing this system. And of course, they're doing it in slow incremental steps, right? They introduce a digital ID, and then they'll introduce, CBDCs and all of the other components that are associated with this draconian oppressive system. And as the MVP said, and I'll continue to reiterate, it is the Chinification, not just of Europe, but we're going to slowly see that this is the Chinification of the world. And any of you who have paid attention to what's happening in China, you know that if you don't have a green QR code, you can't participate in society. You can't buy plane tickets. You can't send your kids to the best schools. Your job is affected, where you can shop. All of these elements restrict your freedoms. And Pastor, as you just mentioned, there's this biblical perspective to this whole buying and selling. And, as was mentioned in the video, it also talks that we should also add the element that you won't be able to purchase groceries. And so everything that was discussed in this video is essentially a part of this beast system that is going to be established.
And for those who aren't aware and want to go to confirm what you just said, that the Panda Nation is actually the model, just remember, the outgoing Prime Minister of Canada is on record saying that, Justin Trudeau. We have played those clips ad nauseum, not a few times. The US leaders have also said that, including the outgoing President of America, Joe Biden. Klaus Schwab is on record stating China is the model. And let's not forget, the Pope of Rome have said China is the model. If you want to understand how we implement the common good, look at China. When the Pope came to America the joint session of Congress, for the first time ever, his message was common good. Look to what's happening in China, you'll see what is coming to the world. And in order for the mark of the beast to be enforced, you can't buy or sell, watch this now, fulfilling chapter 13 of Revelation, verse 15 through 17. There has to be a system of surveillance. Plain and simple. How will they know who is compliant and who is non-compliant? Marie.
Exactly. So we're going to take a look here at another article here. The headline says, EU lawmakers warn a block-wide digital ID wallet could lead to Chinese-style social credit. Let's just take another look here. It says the legislation proposed here on a digital identity for the entire European Union conceals a dangerous, even sinister agenda. So clearly the world can see, where this is headed. It says the idea of a digital wallet essentially puts the finishing touches on a path that will lead us to the total control of society. It is a European Union in which every transaction, every movement, every interaction is recorded. Get that? A continent where citizens' freedoms can be made dependent on a digital green light. This will not be a comfort, but a leash, not a wallet, but a prison. From here, the European Union can become an all-encompassing perpetual QR code. And when I read this, of course, my mind goes back to the dictators of the past. They could only dream of a system like this, right? And imagine the horrors that they were able to perpetuate with the tools that they had. Now, in contrast, imagine what they would be capable of doing had they had the current tools that are being rolled out right now. And of course, they had to wait for the Stasis and the KGB to go through files, to interrogate their neighbors, to determine who is compliant. And we're talking about using AI, which, in mere minutes, or dare I say in seconds, a few seconds, they'll be able to tell you if somebody's out of line, going someplace they shouldn't be going, congregating, all of these things they would be able to determine in a moment's notice. And we're talking about large swaths of individuals. And so I'm hoping that we're starting to see just how draconian this system truly can be. And, it also reminds me of what we're told in the book of Daniel, chapter 12, that the time of trouble is going to be a time such as never was, nor ever shall be. And so the things that we saw in the past, they're going to pale in comparison to what is before us. And the question is, are we ready for that?
Marie, I want people to understand that in a secondary sense, when you look at, I'm going back to China, the model, right? When you look at Revelation 13, verse 11, America will speak as a dragon. Those of you who are live in the comment section right now, what is a national symbol of China? Besides the panda. It's the dragon. Now, a secondary application I'm giving you here. We know what the dragon typifies. Now, we know the mark of the beast begins first in America. There is no debate on that. Here is my point for you to comprehend. Could it be that the mark of the beast system is first being rolled out elsewhere, and America is actually going to model that system? And then all America needs to do is to do what prophecy says she will do, enforce that Sunday law and persecute God's people. So what we're seeing happening in Asia, in Europe, with these things come to America, the pendulum of prophecy swings from east to west. Civilization began east and headed west. So what we're seeing in these current events, the mark of the beast system being rolled out in the east, make no mistake about it, it's coming to the west as a system, but the mark of the beast is first enforced in America. And like a domino effect, like a whirlwind, it will spread globally. Marie.
Now, I just want to augment that point there, because if you look at China, as you just mentioned, they're opposed to Christianity, and they have driven the Christian church, the true Christian church, underground. And so, as you rightly stated, we can clearly see the parallels and how they're going to use the system there to get rid of those who oppose their agenda. And, I encourage your audience to look at some of the documentaries that have been done, and how they have crushed out the spirits of Christians, there in China. So we're going to move forward, and we're going to take a listen here to one of the MEPs, and he's going to discuss the ramifications of this digital wallet and what the next step is going to be. So let's take a listen to that clip here.
I just left the room where we had the negotiations about the digital identity, and I have bad news. The member states and the European Parliament came to an agreement. That means that probably not far from now, the digital identity will be effect in the European Union. Right after this agreement, Commissioner Breton said, now we have the digital identity wallet, we have to put something in it. And what he meant was the digital euro, also known as the central bank digital currency. And this is a very bad development. They always promise us not to make this connection. And even a lot of experts, privacy experts and security experts, warned also last week this is a very bad idea for our privacy and our freedom. And still, this digital identity is pushed through.
Marie,
Right.
before you go, I want to apologize. I did not put the date on this clip because it's important to understand that this was done several months back. So when you understand where you will take us to the current event that is going on presently, you'll see that what was being warned off is now here. Marie.
Yes, you're right. I believe that clip is probably a year old. And so you're correct. And so I want your audience to pay particular attention to what he said. I'm just going to reiterate. He talked about the fact that once they have established the digital wallet, the next step is to be able to put something into the wallet. And here we are today. And this is really the crux of the presentation. But not just that. You got to think about it. The digital wallet, it's just a digital version of the literal wallet. So all of the things that you use in your wallet, you're going to transition over to this digital platform. And so you're talking about your credit cards, your IDs, your benefit cards, your medical cards, et cetera. And of course, cash, right? Except we're no longer going to be using physical cash. They're going to digitalize that. And as you played the clip when we began this presentation, we're going to see that the European Union is rolling out their CBDCs, and I don't think we can emphasize this enough where we are. We're at such a pivotal point. The fact that they're planning to roll this out in October of this year.
Those of you who are live in the comment section, I want all of us to do something here. Put in the comment section everything you carry in your wallet. Everything you carry, you transport in your literal, physical, tangible wallet, put it in the comment section. And as you're typing, just think about all those things will be now on a digital platform. And the day is going to come, if you don't meet certain criteria, you won't be able to use nor access those things you just put in the comment section. And further on, when they roll out the chief criterion, if you do not yield and go along, you're not going to be able to utilize and access those things you have in your literal, tangible wallet. Think about that. And now they're saying October 2025. Watch out, it's coming to the EU. Marie.
And it's so interesting because you always have to renew your licenses. You have to renew your benefit cards and things like that. And so you may be able to use it for a period of time, but once they transition, what are you going to do? And this is why it's so important for us to take a look at these things and see where they're going, and realizing that it's slow and incremental. It's, that frog in the kettle, and it's good for you. And so if you're not paying attention to it, you'll be caught by surprise. So prayerfully, by God's grace, through these presentations, God's people will be ready. So now we're going to take a look at another article here. This is from CoinDesk. It says the ECB, or the European Central Bank, targets October to finish digital euro preparation phase. And of course, they're just saying that, they've been going through this preparation leading up to the launch. And of course, as was stated, the launch is going to be October of 2025. And so let's look at this next article here. It says the European Central Bank has announced plans to introduce a digital euro by October 2025, contingent upon the completion of necessary legislative processes. The proposed regulation grants the digital euro legal tender status, meaning it would be universally accepted for payments within the euro area. And so, again, once they have the central bank receives the approval, I'm assuming it's just from the other member states, they're going to officially launch this central bank digital currency, as was stated in October 2025. And we're going to actually take a listen to Christine Lagarde, again, make the announcement so that you realize that this is, in fact, something that is happening. Let's take a listen to that clip once again.
And for those of you who don't know, Christine Lagarde is the head of the central bank there in the EU. The EU is comprised of what, maybe 27 countries.
It is.
Watch this. Here it is.
I tend to share your views.
And by the way, this is March 7, 2025. Here it is.
I tend to share your views. Nature doesn't like vacuum. And we started working on the digital euro way back. Actually, when I started my term 5.5 years ago. And I'm not claiming, parentality on the digital euro, because my colleague Benoît Cœuré had already committed a speech on this matter before I arrived. But I certainly carried on with that project, and subsequently Fabio Panetta on the board, and then Piero Cipollone, who has replaced Fabio, have taken the lead together with a very, very good team, which is focused on accelerating the pace and hopefully campaigning enough with all the stakeholders, meaning European Parliament, meaning European Council, meaning European Commission, so that we can eventually, not put to bed, but put to reality this digital euro. The deadline for us is going to be October of 25, and we are getting ready for that deadline. But
Marie?
It's there, right? And of course, Pastor, we have discussed this at length. They're planning even in other areas, because many people may think, well, that's just in Europe and other countries. It would be illogical for us to think that the world, other countries are all transitioning to this digital system, and yet America, the most powerful nation in the world, is somehow going to continue using an archaic, outdated system. Even this fiat system, paper documents, and so we have to know that at some point we are going to transition as well. And if you really think about it, our current fiat system is also collapsing. It wasn't designed to go as long as it has been. This is why they're, inflating this balloon. You keep hearing about how this, the economy, the way that it's going to collapse. And so, I find it very interesting, the timing of all of these things. And we'll discuss that a little bit further as we go on in this presentation. But I want to also show or prove that this movement is a universal movement. So let's take a look at this next article here. And I believe this is coming from the United Nations. It says, implementing digital public infrastructure safely and inclusively, It says by 2028, the 50 and 5 campaign will have helped 50 countries design, launch, and scale components of their digital public infrastructure. Digital public infrastructure, which refers to a secure and interoperable network of components that include digital payments, we have already discussed that, a digital ID, and data exchange. That's just the platform that they're going to be using to be able to exchange the information. Now, this is key here because it says it is essential for participation in markets and society in a digital era. And so, again, we're just reiterating this point again, showing you how once they officially roll these things out, and for those in the EU, it's October 2025, you have to engage into this system in order for you to be a part of society here. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish up.
No, I was just simply going to say that, there's no ambiguity here. And the fact that it's essential, when I think about, essential, how are you going to get what you need, right? And so, again, I'm just reiterating the point there. You can come in, Pastor.
Right. So the point I'm going to emphasize now is that it has to come to America. Again, the mark of the beast begins officially in America. We are addressing the periphery, the system that undergirds the mark of the beast. That's what we're talking about. It's happening right now. It's like modern Babylon is being erected. So I'm going to go back to that point. It has to come to America. Those of you who are live in the comment section, do you remember the countries that have already rolled out the CBDC? They have already rolled out a central bank digital currency in their country, in their island, in their nation, or they're on the trajectory of quickly doing so. Which countries are these? I'll start you off. Let me begin in the Caribbean. Jamaica, the Bahamas. Let's start right there. And Barbados is on track for that also. These are leading, influential economies in the Caribbean. And now we have almost all of Europe. It has to come to America. Wake up. And if now they're saying in Europe, without this, you cannot participate in society, breaking news, ring the bell, blow the trumpet, sound the alarm. This is a mark of the beast system. You can buy, you can't sell, except you go along with draconian policies.
Mm-hmm. Right. And we're going to take a look here at a chart, and we've displayed this chart in the past before, but I thought it was important to include it in this presentation as well, because we want to see how the digital ID is what connects us to everything. And so, again, they're rolling it out, piece by piece. And so, and as was mentioned, on the heels of them introducing the ID, they've introduced the CBDC. And so when you're looking at this chart here, you can see how your healthcare information, e-commerce, your buying and selling, social media, smart cities, everything will be connected to the digital ID. And, side note here, I just also want to note, because some people may think what they haven't introduced a digital ID here in the United States. Now, they haven't done it on a federal level, but if you just do a preliminary search on Google, you'll see that there are a plethora of states that have begun rolling out digital IDs. And so, again, all of these things are connected. And I can't help but think about what Catherine Fitz said, how the digital ID, CBDCs, all of these things are going to be the shutting of the gate. And for us, that should bring our minds back to what Christ said, for the destruction of Jerusalem. And could this be the Lord providentially showing us what is about to take place? And for those of us that see it, take the time to make the necessary preparations.
Before you move on, Marie, and proceed, let me just emphasize this point. I want all of us to listen attentively to how ridiculous this digital-only society really is. They want everything to be placed on a digital-only platform. In the same breath, they tell you, watch out for a massive cyber attack. How could that make sense? And then they go on to tell you EMP strikes, which will shut down the whole world. Klaus Schwab is on record. Transportation, hospital, banking, the whole world will be shut down with this massive cyber attack. Cyber, everybody, everything is digital. Everything is based on the internet access. And that's where they're pushing us. How could that make any sense? Secondly, some people are going to say, what could be wrong with having this system? Can it not be used for something good? Of course. That's how the devil works. He always mingle enough good with evil to make the good plausible. Take it away.
Yeah. And Pastor, you're so right with all of these things that are happening. But I wanted to make a point with what you just said about how they're talking about cyber attacks and the systems going down. I personally believe, I don't have any proof for this, but it's just my thought. I believe that they would allow some sort of attack to collapse the current system so that we can transition to the next system. And so it doesn't make any sense that we would move to a completely digitalized system with all of these issues. But when you think about what the plans that they're laying out, it makes sense. So now we're going to transition here in this presentation, and this is really the crux of what we're going to get into. We're going to be looking at several clips from Glenn Beck, and he's going to be discussing how the implementation of the CBDCs there in Europe is going to change the world as a whole between the next 18 to 48 months. So let's take a listen to the first clip here, and then we'll discuss it thereafter.
And Marie, let's keep this in the people's minds. What Glenn Beck is saying is in the same time frame as Christine Lagarde, the chief of the EU banking system.
Yes.
October 2025 is within the same time span, 18 to 48 months.
First of all, let's remember that for years, Christine Lagarde and everybody else, both here, foreign and domestic, have said that any worry about a CBDC is just a conspiracy theory. They have silenced, they have discredited anyone who warned of the dangers of this. But now, all of a sudden, I guess we all forgot that because now they're ready. And the stakes cannot be higher. I'm telling you, 18 to 48 months, our whole world is going to be different. They are ready to launch this now, and the stakes for privacy, free markets, and individual liberty, especially anybody who kind of likes the Constitution, they're at risk, okay? This is a really dangerous pivot that is going on right now.
Marie.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with what he has to say. I don't know about his timeline. To me, it's very plausible. And the reason why I say that is because when I look at, because of course some people may say, well, that's just his personal opinion. However, when I look at how much our world has changed since the pandemic, it is totally plausible, what he is saying. Let's think about that for a moment. Remember when the pandemic began, they told us 2 weeks to flatten the curve, right? And 2 weeks morphed into almost 3 years. And we're talking about 3 years of complete tyranny. And not just that, remember that it began with, being told to voluntarily wear masks, to social distance and to checkpoints and to losing your job because you refuse to be inoculated. And so to me, it isn't that much of leap, Pastor, for us to, believe that once they introduce these CBDCs and the digital ID platform, that we are going to morph into another world within the time frame noted.
Okay, proceed, Marie.
Right. And so he also mentioned the fact that this is, a really dangerous pivot, and I kind of, to me, that's synonymous with a turning point. And I just want to read something that Sister White says in Bible Echo about turning points in the world history. She said, there are periods which are turning points in the history of nations and of the church. In the providence of God, when these different crises arrive, the light for the time is given. If it is received, there is spiritual progress. If it is rejected, spiritual declension and shipwreck follow. And to me, I thought that was a point, a very powerful point, right? Because the light for the time is to implement what God has been telling us that we needed to implement. And that is to move to the country, implement the 5 keys of survival, making sure that you are right with God because the movement, is on foot. And so for those of us who are becoming lackadaisical with what's happening and thinking that we have more time, you're going to be caught off guard. And, I just also want to note, Pastor, as you mentioned, there are all of these smaller nations that have implemented this, digital ID and CBDCs. But as you previously mentioned too, the European Union is made up of 27 individual states that are coming together to transition to a digital platform. I mean, I don't think we can overstate the implications here.
It's interesting how, and let's roll the clip, it's not only interesting, it is providential. It's a biblical thing that people who are not of this community, SDA, can see an ominous crisis on the horizon. They don't fully understand the end goal. They simply say loss of privacy, loss of personal freedom. They see that. It's tyrannical. But what's the end goal? They don't see that. We know what it is. They can see it. And what they can see, they're actually giving a warning. Yet what are our people doing? It's like in John chapter 9, when Christ, Mark 8, John 9, when Christ healed the blind man. And he asked him the first time, what do you see? I see men like trees. And Christ touched his eyes one more time. And now he said, I see all men clearly. I could see clearly now. People in the world have a half anointing. They can see some things. Yet we who have the full anointing, as it were, the ISA, Bible and Spirit of Prophecy, it seems as if we are the ones who are incredulous. Clip 2.
Back in 2020, the European Central Bank said 86% of all central banks are working on this right now. Oh, okay. Then, she said, in 2024, there's a 2-year pilot. But now she said there's a rollout coming for digital currency from the Central Bank of Europe. So it went from conspiracy to reality in a year. And I really am convinced that ASI, digital currency, that's all found in the Bible. I mean, I'm in Bible territory here, specifically the last part of the Bible.
Mercy.
These are the tools that appear very much like the tools foretold, that will be employed by the Antichrist to snuff out anyone who dares to say, I'm really not with him.
I know what I want to say. Let me give you the floor first. Go ahead, Marie.
Well, several points here. He talked about the fact that in 2020, we're talking about 5 years ago, 86% of the central bank, the central banks have been working on a CBDC, 86%, and so, and of course, we're going to prove that
And the central banks govern the countries. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. And we're going to prove that the United States is also a part of that number. But I'm sure the point that you want to drive is the point that he talked about. This is the Antichrist system. Again, have the children of darkness become wiser than the children of light? They can clearly see the correlation between what they're implementing and what the Bible has prophesied is going to happen. So let's, sure, jump in, Pastor.
No, finish up.
No, that's it that I wanted to say with regards to that. And, just the fact that, this is why God has called Seventh-day Adventists, so that we can be a light, to them. We're the ones that have an understanding of the Bible and the Spirit of prophecy and where these movements are tending. And so we have to do our due diligence to not only preach the gospel, but present current events so that we can put 2 and 2 together. Imagine the impetus it would give to what we're saying when we're saying this is where it's going and when it actually happens.
I won't reiterate what you shared. I'm going to say this. I can simply see a secondary fulfillment of Daniel 2, Marie, in the toes. And notice it says that these nations will be mingling themselves together. And later on, we will bring in the papal element, the iron and the miry clay, mingling themselves together. And in this time period, it says, the stone is cut out without hands, and by and by the second coming of Christ, the end comes. Now, the obvious thing is this. As many people say, the obvious many times is not seen clearly. The image of Daniel 2 is a composite of metals that we could look at as finances, gold and silver. And all those elements were once used as a bartering tool in some way, shape, and form throughout the millennia. So notice now, finances, Marie, the economy is being used to bring all these nations together. Sometimes the obvious is not seen. Daniel 2. And what did Christ say in Matthew 24? Study the book of Daniel. You will know what time we're living in. The Antichrist system, the mark of the beast system is here. I'm not sure if you were to ask Glenn Beck, who's the Antichrist? The chief Antichrist. Now, Glenn Beck should know, because Glenn Beck is on record, Marie, you remember this. He actually received the book, The Great Controversy, which in detail tells you what's happening right now. So he has the book, The Great Controversy. And that's why I believe God allowed some of these men with clout to receive this light. And we're told they might not read everything right now. But as the crises begin to unfold, God's Holy Spirit will lead them to the exact page and pages to read, and their eyes will be more opened. And some of them will leave Babylon completely and join with God's commandment-keeping people. And
Amen.
Glenn Beck can reach a wider sphere of audience that we ourselves cannot reach. So let's not be surprised that in some way, shape, and form, God is even using people who are non-SDA right now. Even though they don't have all the light, they're sowing seeds. So when we come in, when we approach them, we can just fill in the blanks, offer them the missing links in the whole puzzle of the great controversy. Marie.
Yes, I want to continue that play on the imagery that you just used from Daniel 2. You know, Pastor, there was also a distinction between God's people, right, and the metals, right, which shows that God's people, our currency isn't based on the world's currency. Our currency is based on heaven. And you see how there's this mingling, and at some point it transitions from clay to miry clay. And so at some point, we're going to have to come off of this system. There should never have been a mingling of God's people with the mingling of the world. And again, you know, we're going to see it later on that even Glenn Beck is going to say that there is going to have to come a separation. So this may be the time where this is a time for us to begin laying the foundation so that we can separate from this system that they're establishing. And I also wanted to note the fact that he says that the system that they're implementing is to snuff out those who are opposed to the Antichrist system. I concur. I completely concur with what he's saying. That's exactly what the system is being designed for. So we're going to take a listen to the next clip here and see what he has to say.
Here it is.
China has already done this. They launched in 2020 with their digital yuan. It tracks everything, and that gives you your currency, but it also gives you the currency to be somebody in good standing. If you don't do exactly what the state tells you to do, you're tracked, you're monitored, and guess who doesn't get to go on an airplane? Guess who doesn't get to take the train? Guess who can't go into certain buildings? You, because you're no longer in good standing. And it gets worse and worse and worse until you are literally living on the streets only because you disagree with the government.
Marie. I know what I want to say.
Again, he's reiterating the same points that we've been talking about for months now, that the system that they're designing is going to track everything, right? And so your non-compliance, your refusal to comply with the system, is going to leave you with absolutely nothing. It's, everything that we saw on the previous chart, right, that's connected to the digital ID is going to be stripped away. And so what are we going to do once that system goes into effect? Take it
And
away.
that's why it's now that we need to petition the Lord for his miraculous assistance so we can implement the 5 keys of survival. Secondly, then you can move on, Marie. Just think about these men, these, as Sister White calls them, men of learning. These men can see something. A crisis is ominous. If we cannot join in this conversation, how are we going to reach them? Think about it. If these men were to come to our churches and our leading ministers aren't speaking about these things frequently, we would never reach them because they would view us as being ignorant of the times. Imagine if Glenn Beck, his staff, were to log on to Prophesy Again TV on YouTube, Safe to Serve, and hear us speaking about this. They would give us a listening ear because we're singing the same song, as it were. We are aligned, as it were, on the same song sheet. I'm not saying we are aligned with his religion, but based on the current events, we're all seeing together something tyrannical is fast approaching. They would give us a listening ear. Not this social gospel. Yes, I said that. Not the pep talks. Yes. No, they realize that we are striking this nail in a sure place. They would realize these people over here on this platform have substance, and it's worth my time to give them a listening ear. That's all I'm saying. If we do not present the word, the prophecies, based on current events, with the work of spiritual and practical preparation, how are we going to reach these folk? It's not going to happen. We should be able to tap into this sphere of influence with the word. Marie.
Yes, we have such a great privilege, with the truths that we have been given, especially as you're speaking, I'm also thinking about the fact that, we've been told in the spirit of prophecy, and thinking particularly in in Desire of Ages, page 121, paragraph 3, right? Where she says, in the last great conflict of the controversy with Satan, those who are loyal to God will see every earthly support cut off. She goes on to say, because they refuse to break his law in obedience to earthly powers, they will be forbidden to buy or sell. It will finally be decreed that they shall be put to death. But to the obedient, it is given the promise. He shall dwell on high. His place of defense shall be the munition of rocks. Bread shall be given him. His water shall be sure. And of course, this is alluding to the great time of trouble. There is a necessary preparation that has to be done in that small time of trouble when the mark of the beast is first implemented to when the plagues actually fall. But it goes to show here how they're going
Marie,
to essentially. Yes, sir.
I don't like doing this. I despise doing it. But I see some comments here. Let's be clear what we're saying here, Marie. Did Sister White write about CBDC? No. But she says every earthly support will be cut off. We have no access. So she gives us a template. So what system will fulfill that? We're seeing it now.
Right.
A digital-only society. And now they're saying in the EU, by October 2025 is their deadline. Now, what if God allows it? Because God may push them back longer. What if God allows it? That means the mark of the beast is nearer than many of us believe. We're in March now. March? How many months between March and October? Less, 7 months? Think about that, Marie.
And And, I guess it boggles my mind that some people can't see this, but if you think about the current system that we have, the fiat system that we have, even if you purchase gold, you can still buy and sell with cash. It doesn't matter. There isn't a middleman between you and, whoever you're purchasing from. And so there has to be some other system that is put in place. And let's think about this, though. The system that's being introduced is not just here in the United States or in Europe. It's being implemented in the entire world. And remember, the no buy, no sell system has to go throughout the world. So when you're seeing this new movement that's introducing an entirely new financial system across the world, you have to know that this is linked to Bible prophecy. And so, for those people who don't see it, unfortunately, all we can do is pray that God will open up their eyes to the events that are taking place. So now we just want to move on, and we want to show that the system that they're designing is not just, like I said, in these other countries, but they're introducing steps even here in the United States. So let's take a look at this first article here. This is coming from Fortune. It says, and of course, I just want to preface this by saying that President Trump just recently introduced this system here in the United States called Stargate. And so this is what we're alluding to here. It says SoftBank CEO, Mr. Sun, will lead massive 500 billion Stargate project with OpenAI's Sam Altman and Oracle's Larry Ellison. I just want you to focus on the name Larry Ellison there. It says, AI executives praise Trump's Stargate project. This is a very large investment that affects all of humanity. So everyone is going to be a part of this, right? Next article, it says Larry Ellison predicts the rise of modern surveillance state where citizens will be on their best behavior. And so there it is. They're telling you, mind you, that Larry Ellison is the one who is in charge, or I should say, is a part of the leadership of this new system that President Trump has just recently announced. We're just going to take a look at one more article here. It says, Oracle's Larry Ellison says that AI will someday track your every move. Isn't that literally what we just heard when we began this presentation? That they said that the system that they're currently rolling out in the European Union is going to do just that. Every transaction where you go, everything that's done on this digital platform is going to be tracked. And so, like I said, lest you think that this is just something that's happening in these other countries, it's happening here in the United States as well.
Marie, repeat that last point so those in the back of the room can hear it.
Well, again, if you're thinking that this is just going to be implemented in China or in these other nations, it's coming here to the United States as well. Mind you that President Trump says the AI system, the infrastructure that they're building is going to be like the central point, right? He wants to be the leader in the AI. They just invested $500 billion into this AI infrastructure. And like I said, the person who is leading this is telling you in the future, he's predicting that in the future, there's going to be an AI system that's going to track everything that you do. Brothers and sisters, I implore you to see that this is where we're going.
Continue, Marie.
So we're going to take a look at another clip here, clip 4 from Glenn Beck, and let's take a listen to what he has to say.
Here it is.
We are already working on a digital dollar here. Europe's move is not isolated. It is a chess move. Well, they're doing it and China's doing it and we better do it. Otherwise, we're going to be left behind. I want to be left behind. There's going to come a time you're going to hear me. Well, you may not because, well, you probably will. Maybe. I don't know. There's going to become a time where I'm going to be like, the Amish have it right. Maybe we should all be Amish. Now, I might be just saying that in a barn with cows and people who are all dressed in black. I don't know. But there's going to come a time where I'm like, I think we should all get out of here and go the other direction. And it could be coming quickly.
I know what I want to say now. Emphatically. Marie, take it away.
I mean, he talked about the Amish. Anyone who knows about the Amish, you know that they're independent of the system. And so he's telling you, he's even saying at some point, I don't know about you, but I'm going to become independent of the system. I mean, Pastor, it's plain there. I keep saying it, have the children of darkness become wiser than the children of light. They're telling you what is going to happen, and so clearly he also mentioned the fact that it's going to happen quickly. Sister White says that the final movements will be rapid ones. it's like, well, I can't say it's like, he's read the great controversy. And so he knows these things. And so, again, I want to reiterate the timeline that he initially discussed between 18 to 48 months.
I have a lot to say. One point. These are signs that God is attempting to awaken his people. Now, if the timeline holds to be true, October 2025, saints of God, those of you alive right now, remember, they wanted to implement this before 2025, all the way back in 2020. That means if it happens October 2025, hindsight, God gave us 4 to 5 years of respite, and we did not make use of it. Let that sink in. Now, if I were you, I would say, Lord, get me ready today. So if it happens, I'm ready. If it is pushed further out in the future, at least I am ready. One of the worst things to do is to be in a crisis, and now you have to be moving much rapidly. Many people, they freeze up. The deer in the headlights effect. Stand still, because fear brings torment. So why do that? Lord, help me to get ready now. This man just alluded to the Amish people. Have they not been in the news recently? I just covered them recently. The state of New York. Listen, we are going to force you families, Amish, and your children to go along with our tyrannical system. If you don't yield, if you don't be compliant, we are going to take away your private property. In other words, we would force you to be a part of our system, or prosecute and persecute you. And God told us long time ago that we should be as the Amish are doing now, even much greater. And we have become the tail and not the head. Imagine if Glenn Beck had said this on March 13, 2025. Instead of saying the Amish people, what if he had said, I imagine I one day would have to be like the Seventh-day Adventist. Should we not have been the model? The world could point to us as the people who are showing the end times and the practical work of preparation and the spiritual work of preparation. This should be a rebuke to Seventh-day Adventists, that those in the world cannot point to us as the model. They're not pointing to the Amish and not the SDAs. But God will have a people, and that's why I say, Marie, God has to bless by God's grace, humbly speaking, a group in the last days to be that model, that light upon the hill everybody can see and begin to emulate. Marie.
We have to redeem the time. Correct, Pastor. I just want to touch on one of the points he mentioned. He talked about the fact that this was a chess move, what they did in Europe. He also alluded to the fact that by them implementing this CBDC system there in Europe and in China, what's essentially going to happen is that the United States is going to see this as competition, which is going to further augment or force them to transition perhaps even faster, because other nations are now rolling out this digital currency. Now, I want to confirm that the United States is already well underway implementing a form of digital currency. Let's take a look at the next few headlines here. This one is coming from CNBC. It says, Federal Reserve launch FedNow instant payment system. Let's take a look at this next article here. It says, So the Fed chairman, Jerome Powell, said the central bank was not close to releasing a US CBDC. Now, listen carefully, though. It says the Fed now addresses the issues that some have raised about the need for a CBDC. And so we currently have an instant payment system in place, the FedNow system. And what the article is essentially saying is that the system that they just implemented, was it a year or 2 years ago, essentially addresses the exact same thing. And we're going to listen to an audio clip or a video in which he's going to say the exact same thing that I'm saying. So let's take a listen to that video here.
Here it is.
That actually works, or right now the Fed has already put in place FedNow, a suite of retail and wholesale payment services that I think will achieve a lot of what a CBDC or a digital dollar could achieve. So we may get to the objective without necessarily having a digital dollar.
Just don't name it CBDC. Give it a different name, different packaging, put a nice bow on it, same exact system in the package.
It is. And that's why I say, Pastor, it's here. You may not see it. I mean, what else are they going to do with a $500 billion AI infrastructure? The instant payment system, that seems very innocuous, right? This FedNow system, instant payment, right? It doesn't seem like, CBDC or anything that's programmable or that will be able to control what you're able to buy and sell. And this is why, they talk about how they're implementing these things through the back door. And again, if we're not paying attention, it's going to catch us off guard here. And, this is a perfect segue too, because Glenn Beck in this final clip is going to tell us that what they're rolling out is programmable. So let's take a listen to that as well.
Here it is.
This will replace your cash with what are called programmable, trackable tokens. Programmable meaning, hey, we have inflation for gas, or we don't want you buying so much gas because we've got to reduce emissions. Who's an essential person that needs to go to work? Everybody who has money in their bank that's not deemed essential, you no longer can fill your tank with gas. It won't work at any gas pump. Okay? That's a programmable currency. Every single transaction, from buying bread, paying rent, everything is programmable by the state. In Parliament, when they were talking about this, maybe in 2018, they were arguing that we can't pass any of this until it's programmable. It must be programmable.
May I?
Certainly.
This is a counter system to God's model. There are three traits that comprise to make God divine: omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence. This system will allow the tyrants on the very top, in a secondary sense, to appear to have those three attributes. Because now they'll have omniscience, quote unquote. They know everything about everybody. Omnipresence, their eyes and their knowledge is everywhere, and they know your every move. Surveillance, $500 billion in infrastructure. And Trump says America will be the lead of that system. Number three, all power. It gives them omnipotence over you and the whole world. This is the Antichrist, the Babylon system. This is the draconian system prophecy has predicted. Marie.
Yes, and so I also want to mention the fact that, that clip pretty much speaks for itself. But once they implement the system, we here in America, we're working against the clock. We're already working against the clock. And it's only a matter of time, like I said, before the United States follows suit. And I just, I briefly had mentioned the fact that our economy, is collapsing. I just want to touch on a few articles in which, because when President Trump came into office, he talked about how he's going to reinvigorate the economy. But I want you to see how he's done a complete 180 and take a listen to what he is saying is going to happen. So let's look at a few articles here, and then we'll take a listen to a clip here. And the first one from Axios says, economic alarm bells are ringing everywhere. The next article from Newsweek says Trump official says no guarantees U.S. will avoid a recession. Now, for those of you who may not necessarily understand or know what a recession is, putting it in a layman's term, a recession is when your neighbor loses their job. A depression is when you both lose your job. And so we're going to see a decline. But the article goes on to say here, it says, U.S. Treasury Secretary said there's no guarantees when asked during a Sunday interview whether he could guarantee the American public that the country would not see a recession during President Trump's term. And so the Treasury Secretary is saying the same thing that the president is saying. And so this article from the Wall Street Journal, where President Trump himself declines to rule out a recession. President sees a period of transition as he tries to reshape the U.S. economy. And of course, there's all sorts of things are happening. There's inflation. He's introducing tariffs, which isn't something new, but you have all of these elements, all of these things that are happening. And of course, the markets are kind of going haywire, especially with the comment that he just made. And so let's take a listen to a clip where he's going to tell you for himself that there is no certainty that we won't end up in a recession.
Here it is.
Let me stay on the economy for a moment, because there are rising worries about a slowdown. You've got the Atlanta Federal Reserve saying we're going to have a contraction in the first quarter. Look, I know that you inherited a mess, and you said that the other night.
I've only been here,
but are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition, because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing. And there are always periods of, it takes a little time. It takes a little time.
Can you give us a sense?
Marie.
Spoken like a true politician, right? He totally avoided the question, and so you have to be able to read between the lines here. And again, I just want to point out the fact, or I want us to look at the grand scheme of things. Look at the timing of everything that's happening, right? The economy is going down. He introduced this Stargate system, this AI system. The EU has introduced, CBDCs, the digital wallet. All of these things are happening simultaneously. All of these cyber attacks and things that are, affecting the infrastructure, they're all happening simultaneously. And like I said, I think it's happening at the same time. So once they finally flip the switch, we'll be able to transition right into this digital system. And as was stated throughout this presentation, it's going to happen sooner than most of us think.
Two things. Number one, that is not the way how President Trump generally speaks.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, listen attentively. Go back, rewind the video right here, and look at his posture, look at his cadence, and the actual words he's speaking. On major topics that confront the president in interviews, he's always optimistic. Things will be great, excellent, and success, always speaking positively. Not here. Why the change? Why the change, the sudden change? That's number one. Think. Number two, based on economists, we're told, as far as they can trace the history of America based on banking and finance and the economy, every 7 years, there is a market correction. It's apparent. It's expected every 7 years, a market correction, meaning an economic crisis. The last one we had, Marie, was 2008. And if you realize, meaning the great bubble with these banks, Lehman Brothers went down. I mean, it shook the whole world. I was saying to my cousin recently, speaking about this, and do you remember, how many of you in the comment section remember a bank called Washington Mutual? Non-existent. Fannie Mae and Fannie Mae, all these banks began to accumulate smaller banks. 2008. So based on history, when should have been the next crisis in the economy? 2015. And ever since that point, they have been talking about a coming recession, a coming market correction. Beloved, That was 2008. We're in 2025. Why has this thing taken so long to transpire? Every 7 years, there is a market correction. We haven't had one since 2008. I'm wondering what the next one is going to be like and feel like. How is it going to impact the economy and the common person down the road? When this one hits, it's going to be the mother of all crashes, because now they can hit the reset button, the great reset. You watch what's coming. Marie, you may proceed.
Pastor, it's the great controversy, right? Where Sister White talks about how they're going to try to restore temporal prosperity. And you've touched on this in the past. You've talked about how even during the pandemic, Nancy Pelosi, they wanted to introduce some sort of digital payment system, right? To be able to give people some sort of stimulus, in response to the recent pandemic. And so can you imagine, we had this catastrophic economic collapse, right? And an incentive to get you to buy into the system is, hey, we'll give you, and Elon Musk, and I think a couple of people have touched on the fact that with all of the money that they've accumulated from, Doge and how they're, cleaning up the system, wouldn't that be a great incentive if we could all pay you $5,000, through this new digital system?
Sign up.
This is
Sign up.
Right.
Sign up.
And how many people can't afford groceries right now because of inflation and can't meet their bills? It's a perfect segue, perfect way for them to get society to get into the system. Remember in the account of Joseph, right? They didn't end up selling themselves and their land immediately. It was a slow step, right? They ended up giving this and that, and until it got to the place where they gave everything up. They were willing. They're like, take us, and so this is where we're going. And so I hope that the Lord can open up our eyes.
You may proceed, Marie.
Yes. So, we're just going to bring this to a close here. And I just want to just reiterate again what Catherine Fitz has said. She says that this is the shutting of the gate. Once they introduce the digital IDs, once they introduce the CBDCs, and as we mentioned, we're talking, October 2025. But I just want to read a scripture from Luke 19, verse 42 and 44, which I think, really augments this. It says, and this is Jesus speaking, he says, saying, if thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. For the day shall come upon thee that thy enemies shall cast a trench about thee and compass thee round about and keep thee in on every side and shall lay thee even with the ground and thy children within thee. And they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another. And the reason why, because thou knowest not the time of thy visitation. And so, brothers and sisters, we have to be like the tribe of Issachar. They knew what time it was. They knew what they were supposed to do. Pastor has talked ad nauseum about implementing the 5 keys of survival. Number 1 is the most important: conversion, country living, all of these steps. We can't only be hearers. We have to be doers of the word.
Marie, you said,
Yes.
let's wrap this up.
Mm-hmm.
Who told you that? It's my time now.
Well, I'm wrapping up my end.
On a serious note, let's dialogue on these closing points here. You referenced Luke 19 as your closing remarks. I want everyone to note really what's happening in Luke 19. Marie just referenced verse 42 to verse 44. The next verse and verses of Luke 19 after Christ wept in verse 41, verse 44 through verse 45, 46. Do you know Christ cleansed the temple? Marie, he cleansed the temple from whom?
Jewish.
The bankers, the money changers. And our lesson today was regarding the bankers. And at the beginning of Christ's ministry, he targeted the bankers, the money changers, because they were deceiving and enslaving the people. John chapter 2, verse 13 to verse 17. Get these money changers out of here at the beginning of his ministry. But some way, somehow, they were allowed to come through the back door because 3.5 years later, Marie, they showed up again. And Christ had to what? Cleanse them a second time from the temple. In other words, they just do not relent. The bankers will not give up until they deceive, enslave the masses. That's Bible, my friends. And Luke 19 that Marie just referenced, Christ wept because the people did not know the day of their visitation. And the parents and the children, Christ said, would suffer as a result. Christ cleansed the temple. Who should have been the ones to warn the people? The spiritual guardians, the spiritual leaders, the pastors, the elders. Where were they? In other words, they were a part of the money system. Because once you're being fed by the system, pun intended, fed now, Marie, fed now cash payment in America, you will not turn over tables with money and bring about a change if you are dependent upon the monies from that table. And that's why many preachers don't preach against this system, because they are being fed by the system. Marie, there were a few things that you alluded to. I'm going to put the nail in a sure place now. So let's continue here. On the screen is Christine Lagarde, the same one who said by October 2025, that's our deadline for the money of the beast system. Notice how deceptive she is. Watch this clip.
The digital euro is on the move. Yesterday, the Governing Council of the ECB approved the opening of the preparation phase. It will be a journey, and we will walk the journey together with the legislator. All European institutions will be involved to make sure that Europe is equipped with the currency of the future. Cash is here to stay.
What? Come on this journey, Marie, she said. Now, what date does the journey end? You know, normally we would say, what location the journey ends. No, my question is, what's the date for the end of this journey, Marie?
October 2025.
That's it. That's their deadline. She just said cash is what, Marie?
I didn't catch.
It's here to stay.
Right.
She's being disingenuous. Here she is next when she was called into an interview. Watch now. Here she is. Listen attentively.
No, the problem is they don't want to be controlled. They don't want to.
Yeah, but you know what? Now we have in Europe this threshold. Above 1,000 euros, you cannot pay cash. If you do, you are on the grey market. So you take your risk. You get caught, you are fined, or you go in jail. But, you know, the
How could cash be here to stay? And several months back, she said, if you are caught transacting more than $1,000 in cash, not dollars, 1,000 EU in cash, you'll be prosecuted and you'll be placed in jail. How could that mean cash is here to stay? So there's no transaction over $1,000 euro. Just can't do it. And now they are going to say not even $900, not even $500, not even $100, not even $1 or €1. I keep saying dollar. I'm here in the West. Not even €1. Totally digitalized. These people are deceptive.
Threshold above 1,000 euros, you cannot pay cash. If you do, you are on the gray market. You take your risk. You get caught, you are fined, or you go in jail.
Let's come back here. Marie, do you want to add anything?
Like you said, she's being very deceptive, and it's a sly way of making everyone feel comfortable with transitioning into the system, right? Maybe I'll try it, see if I like it. If I don't, I can jump back out, not knowing that eventually they're going to start penalizing you for using the system. Very, very shrewd.
Now, she's on record, Marie, stating that they want to control the social media platforms. And she wants them to hinder, prohibit any platform that is speaking against their system. Can you imagine that? Do you believe that? It's right there in print. Reuters news. Shut them down. Again, I ask the question.
And the title of this session, are we ready for a new world order?
Now, Marie, I have in the queue Pippa Malmgren. What did she say, if you recall, that underlines, undergirds the new world order?
The economy. The economy.
For those in the audience who aren't privileged of this information, here it is.
And it's not about the U.S. versus China. It's about what underpins a world order is always the financial system. I was very privileged. My father was an advisor to Nixon when they came off the gold standard in '71. And so I was brought up with a kind of inside view of how very important the financial structure is to absolutely everything else. And what we're seeing in the world today, I think, is we are on the brink of a dramatic change where we are about to, and I'll say this boldly, we're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting and introduce a new one. And the new one, the new accounting, is what we call blockchain. It means digital. It means having a almost perfect record of every single transaction that happens in the economy, which will give us far greater clarity over what's going on. It also raises huge dangers in terms of the balance of power between states and citizens. In my opinion, we're going to need a digital constitution of human rights.
Mercy. Marie, take it away.
Now, Pastor, that video clip is from 2022, if I'm not mistaken, right?
You are correct.
The World Government Summit, She was telling you in 2022 that we are transitioning to blockchain. Blockchain is just digitalized system, right? Where everything's tracked. She told you back then. And so what we heard back then, and even in 2020, is coming to fruition. And this is why, again, we're deluded if we think that the United States and all of these countries aren't going to embrace this. They're going to. She told you this back in 2022.
Now, two things on that point. Marie, that was 2022, March. And by October 2025, the EU will launch theirs. That is approximately 3 years. Think about that. Number two, she said there is going to be a great shift and an imbalance of power, meaning the tyrants will have all the power. That's omnipotence, that they're actually counterfeiting from God's trait of divinity. And with this system of finance, they'll have clarity into everything you do, omniscience. Everywhere you go, omnipresence. Watch out, my friends. Now, who is behind this? Marie, go ahead. Because now is where we are getting into the nitty-gritty of this. Marie?
I just want to, again, augment that point. You just talked about how once we transition to this system, she talked about how we're going to need like a new, I don't remember the exact word she used, new constitution or something.
Yes.
It leads my mind back to what Sister White says, that every principle of the Constitution will be repudiated. So again, it looks on the surface like you still have those rights, not knowing that once you transition into this no buy, no sell system that they're creating, this digitalized platform, your rights, once you enter into that system, your rights have been stripped away. And you don't even know it because you've embraced the system that they developed, not knowing that they have full control. They can turn it off and turn it on whenever they desire.
So, in other words, Marie, we will still have the U.S. Constitution, whatever governs Europe and whatever governs the Caribbean islands. But now, while it's still there, they have control.
Exactly.
They can monitor and they can demand what you do, when you do, and how you do. So, in essence, are you really free?
No.
Do you have liberties?
Open air prison.
Okay. And notice here, behind the whole system is who? Who called for a new world order post the pandemic? The Pope of Rome.
Did.
A new economic order post the pandemic. And this man said it must be digital, fulfilling Revelation 18, verse 11 through verse 13. And the last phrase says they will control every commodity, every industry, meaning from food to transportation, meaning horses, food, flour, wheat, all of it. They will control every aspect of society, even the economy, gold and silver. The last phrase says they will enslave the souls of men. This is Kristalina. She is actually the IMF director. She says, I am going to put in place the Pope's priorities. It's right there, friends. We're not making this up. And what is it? A CBDC. Headline says, this is not the time to turn back. Here she is. Listen, this clip is fast-paced.
And growing number of countries are steaming ahead with development and deployment of central bank digital currencies. And while crypto assets, including stablecoins, have had their ups and downs, they're not going away. The international payments system needs to be improved. We need to make it cheaper, quicker, and easier.
Here she is. And this clip reminds me of Daniel 2. Here it is.
My second point is that if we are to be successful, CBDCs could not be fragmented national propositions. To have transactions more efficient and fairer, we need systems that connect countries. In other words, we need interoperability. And for this reason, at the IMF, we are working hard on the concept of a global CBDC platform to trade and to manage risks. And my colleague, Tobias Adrian, will talk more about it later
Marie,
in the day.
Let's talk more about this. Go ahead, Marie.
I hope they caught that. She said that we can't have fragmented like digital platforms, right? So right now it's fragmented. You know, China has their own digital system, you know, Europe, Jamaica, all of these countries.
The Bahamas.
Yes. So what she is saying is that we need a global CBDC. Lord have mercy, once they establish that. You know, so right now you're just seeing the tentacles coming up, but eventually all of those systems are going to unite together.
The CBDC, or the central bank digital currency, is all set to go global thanks to the International Monetary Fund, which is working on a global platform for CBDC transactions. The IMF wants countries to agree on a common framework for digital currencies for two main reasons here. A common law will help in easy transaction of CBDCs around the world. A global framework will keep a check on unregulated cryptocurrencies. Speaking at a banking conference, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva said that CBDCs could help promote financial inclusion across the world. She said, I'm quoting here, if countries develop CBDCs only for domestic deployment, we are underutilizing their capacity. For this reason, IMF is working on the concept of a global CBDC platform.
That is bringing all the nations together. Don't be deceived with the words. it's going to bring about financial inclusion. It's only going to be inclusive for those who go along with their draconian, inimical policies to our liberties. Let me wrap this up here. And what's the end goal? By 2030. Remember that? 7 years now. 7 years. Everything has to be digital. It's right there. The UN. So, Marie, so we had the EU, we had the IMF, and we had the UN. America is on the heels. They're all saying the same thing, and the deadline is 2030. The EU says now by October 2025. Let's move on here and bring this to a close. Listen.
But now we're at the cusp of physical currency essentially disappearing. Now the question is whether this actually leads...
Stop. Who remembers President Trump said the very same thing? If you roll out CBDCs, your cash will one day disappear. And on the back end of that statement, he's implementing a system that does the very same thing. Listen again, friends. The Lord have mercy on our souls.
But now we're at the cusp of physical currency essentially disappearing. Now the question is whether this actually leads to all the benefits that one might think of. Certainly, digital money in whatever form is more convenient for businesses, for consumers, for governments, because it pulls economic activity out of the shadows, reduces the use of central bank issued money for illicit purposes.
Clip 2.
Policy. And the one final note I will make is that if you think about the benefits of digital money, there are huge potential gains. It's not just about digital forms of physical currency. You can have programmability, units of central bank currency with expiry dates. You could have, as I argue in my book, a potentially better and some people might see it, or a darker world where the government decides that units of central bank money can be used to purchase some things, but not other things that it deems less desirable.
Mercy. Clip 3, right there. Marie, your feedback afterward. Clip 3.
So there are wonderful notions of things that can be done with digital money. But again, I fear that technology could take us to a better place, but equally has the potential to take us to a pretty dark place.
Mercy. Marie.
Yes.
Hold on, Marie. Marie, hold on. Clip 4. Listen.
Buy Bitcoin for an investment purposes. It's about being a sovereign individual, because money is the energy which fuels your life. So if you don't have control of your money, you don't have control over anything, and you, in my opinion, really just become a slave. Because
Marie, take it away.
Yes, she's right. And like he said, we're going to go into a darker world, in the great controversy, she says that the noon of the papacy is the midnight of the world, and so this is the baby of the papacy, right? Once they establish this system, they're going to be able to control us, but I just wanted to emphasize one interesting point there. Your money doesn't have an expiration date, right? You can have $20 and it's still going to be worth whatever it's worth, whenever you decide to use it. But it's interesting that once they roll out the CBDCs, they can put expiry dates, and so you can have $200, but if you don't use that $200 when they say you need to use it, it's gone. So you're back to zero. So there's no way out of the system. There's no progression. And it just goes to show you can see it. You can see how they're going to enslave humanity once we get into this system. So it's time for us to hasten our footsteps.
Beloved, I'm going to end on a point of warning, urgency, warning and urgency with these two clips.
And the reality, as the financial system gets more controlling and more invasive, it's a little bit like bringing up a corral around us. And CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, and vaccine passports or digital IDs are sort of the last shutting of the gate.
The last shutting of the gate. Clip 2.
I think it's very hard for people who've grown up and enjoyed Western liberty and human liberty to imagine literally that we're going into a system where literally our homes, our cars, our communities become digital concentration camps.
Luke 21, we're being surrounded, friends. It's clear. It's time to flee to the mountains. The 5 keys of survival must be implemented. Marie, we have come to the close of yet another timely, relatable, and applicable, urgent message for God's people. And all we can do now is pray. All we can do now is pray. Claim God's promises, knowing that He will never bring upon us a crisis that He cannot sustain us through. As we always say, He will never bring us to a Red Sea without the power to bring us through it. Never. Trust God. Let's pray. Father in heaven, today we have taken one step closer to the mark of the beast crisis, your second coming. On one hand, it's a joy to know, oh, we see the gleams of the golden morning piercing through this night of gloom. Oh, we see the gleams of the golden morning that shall burst the tomb. On the other hand, before that day, we have to go through a crisis. But we will cling to your promises as we surrender all to you. You have promised never to forsake us as we commune with you daily, evening, morning, and at noon. You know where we need to be physically and spiritually. We surrender all. Have thine own way, Lord. Have thine own way. Thou art the potter, and we are the clay. Take full control of our lives. Help us not to make any wrong moves or decisions that will bring regret. Take us out of the spirit of lingering and procrastination. Give us the spirit of urgency to move in step with you. We thank you for your love and your mercies. Bless your people who made the sacrifice to join us live, even those in the comment, and be with those also that would join us hereafter. We thank you for hearing us. We thank you for answering. Help us to remember we have nothing to fear for the future, except we shall forget how God has led his teachings in our past history. Worry is blind and cannot discern the future, but Jesus knows the end from the beginning. In every difficulty, he has a way prepared to bring relief. Is our prayer with thanksgiving in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Marie, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Safe to serve, local, international, first-time viewers. Thank you for joining us for this presentation. By God's grace, I'll see you on tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern. Those of you who are live in the comment section, how many of you are still receiving a blessing from the all-night prayer meeting? If you're still receiving a blessing from the all-night prayer meeting we had Friday, this past Friday, midnight into Sabbath, just type in the words, we need another all-night prayer meeting. Another all-night prayer meeting. Another all-night prayer meeting. That's the experience we all need. Let's get ready, remain ready, get others ready. The Lord is soon to come. The protest, the reformation continues. Maranatha.